So, if you've been paying attention to politics in the US the last couple cycles, the Republicans in particular, and just conservatives in general, have faced a fairly unbroken stream of disasters, going back to them losing the House halfway through Trump's first term, and then the 2020 presidential election, which was really an unmitigated disaster. Now, we can talk, of course, about ethics in video game journalism, and I've talked about that in the past. But beyond that, if you look at the precedent going into it, in 2016, Trump won Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania. He won basically every swing state other than Nevada and New Hampshire that he realistically could have won. And all those went away in the 2020 presidential election. Regardless of whether you think video game journalism was ethical or not in the way that it covered the lead up to the election, the point is they still lost. And most of these states were controlled by Republicans. In some of the states, the Republicans, I think, even had super majorities and the governor, and they still couldn't do anything about it. So to me, it's like, who really is the problem? Is it the video game journalist who has very unethical reviews and review bombs or gives things reviews much higher than they should be? Or is it the people who control and own the website who continue to let the person post their articles there and make no attempt to rein them in or to maybe hire writers who are more ethical when it comes to writing video game journalism articles? And this continued into the 2022 midterm election. And we heard all this stuff that ethics in video game journalism had been cleaned up, that the Republicans used the fact that they controlled all these swing states to actually do something about it, that we got these amazing candidates, that we got like based Italian Mennonite man, and don't vote for me if you voted for John McCain, Carrie Lake, and another colorful cast of weirdos together. And I remember everybody was like, the red wave just got 10 feet higher. We're going to take 56 Senate seats. We're going to flip Washington. We're going to flip all these other states. We're going to pick up all these governor races. And it just went on and on and on. And then it was a complete shit show. They lost a bunch of easy Senate pickups. They lost a bunch of easy governor races. And they only managed to take the House because Lee Zeldin randomly did really good in New York. And they picked up a couple seats in California. And if you're the Republican Party and you have to count on the New York and California party to carry you across the finish line, that's a really bad place to be. And as I said, when it came to the 2022 presidential election, did ethics in video game journalism matter? Yeah, it probably did, especially in a couple swing states. But that's really no excuse, because once again, they controlled most of these states for the entire duration. They had 2 years to fix these problems, and they didn't fix any of them, apparently. Not only did they not fix any of the issues, but they didn't learn any from any of the failures of 2020. And it was just a complete disaster in an environment that should have been very favorable to them. And so this brings us to last night's election, that is the Wisconsin Supreme Court election. Now, as a Canadian, the idea of electing judges is kind of weird to me. But apparently in the US, in a lot of cases, they will elect judges. And in this case, the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And you had Dan Kelly, who was running for it. Now, it's weird because it's technically nonpartisan, but there's normally a liberal and a conservative judge, and the respective state parties will back each one. So they're not technically running under their party's banner, but they're running under their party's banner. And I remember looking at the primaries, which the conservatives got completely felted in, although if you add the two of them together, it wasn't that bad. But I was just looking at the math and look, the Republicans have a super majority in both in the state Senate, and they have I'm not sure if it's an absolute majority. They have more than 60% of the seats in the House. So this is like a dark red state. This is like the margins you see in some southern states. And yet they couldn't win the governor race, and they couldn't win the Supreme Court race. And people were saying, well, Janet or whatever her name is going to win. And I'm like, isn't it a red state? How wouldn't Kelly? It's like saying that like in the Republican isn't the favorite to win in like some other state with like Idaho or something. And it's like, okay, so there wasn't the favorite, and then there was all these people, the same people again. And to be fair to them, there's no point in being blackpilled. There's no point in saying we can't even try. There's a 0% chance of winning. We just need to not do anything. I get that, and I'm on board. You have to give people at least some hope. But a lot of people were saying we're getting the ballot harvesting going. We're doing early voting. We're raising money. We're barnstorming. We've learned our lesson this time. We learned our lesson from the shit show that was the 2022 midterms, and we're going to get our head on straight. And then it was a disaster again, and he lost by 10 points. And so this brings us to the question, why can the Republicans not win? Why can they not win even in dark red states where they should be able to easily win? It's an interesting question, and this is a question you have to ask of conservative parties all throughout the Western world. And this is something we've been asking for like the last 30, 40 years. Generally speaking, most of the things that the left has done have been exceedingly unpopular. They've had to do them through like Obamacare, you have to pass it, the bill to find out what's in it, or they have to have the Supreme Court do it because they can't do it electorally. But so it's unpopular, and they can somehow win state assemblies. Why can't they win any of these like statewide or national races? Why is it such a disaster? And it's more or less the same in Canada and in Britain and a lot of different places. You'll have right-leaning parties or what passes for right-leaning in these countries that just can't get their shit together. Now, in a lot of cases, it is the electoral system. In France, my understanding is runoffs were explicitly put in place to prevent the National Front from winning elections. But I think it goes a bit deeper than that. So let's maybe after 7 minutes of me just making fun of the Republican Party, let's just kind of get down to brass tacks. So what is the problem? Because I can complain about incompetence, I can complain about all this stuff, but do I have actually something constructive to say about it? So let's get the two elephants out of the room, pun intended. Firstly, let's talk about ethics in video game journalism. Now, did ethics in video game journalism cost Donald Trump the 2020 election? Probably. If you had gone in with a completely ethical slate of journalists who respected the reviews that people left on Steam and IMDb and Metacritic, yeah, Trump probably would have won the election. But the midterm, I don't think it would have been enough. It might have flipped like 1 or 2 seats, but I don't think ethics in video game journalism was the big issue there. And we can blame it for that. And it is a problem, but for the moment, it's just something they're going to have to deal with. And they seem to have no way of dealing with it. Even when they have political power and they have super majorities and they can do things about it, they don't do things about it. So it's just kind of like, I don't think that's the issue. If you're losing by like 10 points and it doesn't appear that there's any unethical video game journalism, then you have bigger issues. The second one, and I've seen this a lot, is people saying that conservative ideas, nationalist ideas are just not popular, that if people who broadly share our worldview want to win, we have to say late-term abortion's awesome, we need more immigration, we have to embrace Black Lives Matter, we have to support cutting kids' genitalia off and pumping them full of hormones, and just kind of all the other stuff. And like, if we adopt all of that, we win. So if that is the case, and the public is so corrupt that you have to say that and do those kind of things to appeal to them, at that point, there's really no point in pursuing electoral politics. I get that we live in the real world and you're going to have to compromise. You're going to have to say, okay, we can't get a total abortion ban, but maybe we could get it restricted to the first trimester. Maybe we could implement some kind of restrictions because most people don't support partial birth or post-birth abortion or third trimester. Maybe we'll have to compromise a bit. But if what we have to do to win elections is to say post birth abortion is awesome, I'll hold these scissors for it, then there's no point in running. At that point, you might as well either just drink yourself to death or just play Minecraft or something like that, because there's no point in it. At that point, it's better to just let the government martyr you, or to just go down at your post like a good soldier. So those are kind of the two things I just kind of have to sort of dismiss because it's not productive. Okay, ethics in video game journalism is a problem. There's nothing that can be done about it, even with supermajorities and governors. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, if the public is as bad as some people think they are, then we're just doomed. Everything we believe in is doomed, and it's not even worth having this discussion. So before we reach either of those conclusions, let's just see if there's anything else that we can talk about. Is there somewhere else that we can look at for why conservative parties lose, why this can't happen? So I think the first thing we have to point to is the whole rural, urban, suburban thing. The truth of the matter is, in a lot of these cases, the reasons why Republicans lose and why conservatives in a lot of places lose is because rural people just don't vote enough. And obviously, this varies from election to election. But I think conservatives have just come to the conclusion that if we gerrymander it so that the rural people have a disproportionate share of voting power, they'll always just show up and vote conservative, and that'll allow us to just coast to victory. We don't have to do anything to appeal to urban areas. We don't have to do anything to appeal to people under the age of 50 or anything like that. We don't have to appeal to college educated people. We don't have to come up with our own policy solutions. So long as we gerrymander hard enough, then old people will just come out in rural areas and vote for us, and we'll somehow win the elections. And that just doesn't work. It works in some states, but maybe in Wyoming that works, maybe in Montana that works, maybe that even works in the South. But they keep betting on this in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, and it's just a constant disaster. And it's at what point do you go, it's not enough to just try to get no effort rural voters to turn out. They just don't turn out in the numbers that you need them to, for whatever reason. There's not even really enough of them to reliably win. And I just think it's a losing strategy, especially with mass immigration. The cities are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the rural areas are going to continue to decline. And you're going to have people moving from the rural areas to the urban areas. And once again, I don't think you're ever going to, as a right-wing nationalist party, although, to be fair, fascists did pretty well with the working class and the middle class, but that's neither here nor there. Even if you're never going to get a majority of the city vote, you could maybe aim for, instead of getting 15%, to get 30%. This is when we talk about the whole black Hispanic vote thing. The Republicans are never going to win a majority of the black vote. They're especially not going to win it if they just pander and they act like Democrats. But they could maybe campaign on some social issues, talk about crime, some stuff like that. Maybe they could make it go from 5% of the black vote to 10 to 15%. And that kind of thing makes a huge difference when you're looking at overall politics, especially given how close a lot of elections often are. So maybe the Republicans could go, maybe we could try to do 5, 10, 15% better in cities, and we turn it from being a complete and utter vote sink to being a disadvantage, but one we're still somewhat competitive in. And when it comes down to it, what do conservatives offer urban populations? What do they really offer them at the end of the day? Let's take myself for this matter. I am a urban young professional who does not have a family. The only reason I have, if I lived in the US, to vote for the Republicans is out of a sense of duty for moral cultural issues because of my Christian faith. And because they're better on illegal and legal immigration than the Democrats are. When it comes down to just pure gives me that or just material benefits, most people in urban areas have no reason to vote for the Republicans. It's like we're going to give tax cuts to families. Well, I don't have a family, so it's just like, okay, so the tax cuts to families, even if it's good policy, it's just saying to single people, we're going to take your money and give it to somebody else. So vote for us so we can take money from you. Once again, I don't necessarily disagree with the policy, but that is basically how it comes across to a lot of people. Generally speaking, they don't support things like public transportation or just anything that really like would appeal to an urban person. I mean, lower taxes kind of do. Tough on crime whenever they bring that up kind of does, but they don't even really campaign much in cities. I never see that messaging. I never really see, at least in Canada, like the Conservative Party come into a city and say, look, we're going to be tough on crime. You're victimized by crime. Or even really, like I said, tax cuts. It'll just be tax cuts for like families or something, which doesn't benefit me in any way. And if you're in the US, it's even worse. Like, what is the Republican healthcare plan? There is none. There's no Republican healthcare plan, and there hasn't been one, I think, basically ever. So you're asking people who, let's say, young working professionals, to subsidize older people, and to subsidize families, and to vote against their rational self-interest for a party that's not going to provide them with affordable health care. So they're going to continue to live in a limbo where if they get sick or suffer an injury, they're just going to be completely fucked and the rest of their life is going to be spent paying off medical bills. Now, don't get me wrong, Democrats suck at that too, but they at least pretend that they're for some sort of healthcare reform. Obamacare may have been an ungodly chimera of public and private systems, but at least it was something resembling a plan. It was a horrible plan, but at least Obama said, I'm going to do something about healthcare. Did Trump even say he was going to? It's like, we're going to repeal and replace it. Well, repeal and replace it with what? I don't know. We're maybe going to have some protectionism to help out industrial workers. We're going to have tax cuts for families and not people who aren't families. We're going to control spending. And then you get into shit like, it's socialism. We have to fight social. Like, who cares about socialism? Is anybody under the age of 60 like even really know what socialism is or care about it? Like, when was the last time that like the government actually nationalized an industry? Actually brought in like an entitlement program that wasn't just them giving money to a special interest group. I can't even really remember one. If anything, as a Canadian, I kind of like, you know what, let's bring a national pharmacare. We can't afford it, but it's at least something that would benefit me materially in some way, because it would be a program that like everybody, regardless of their race, could take part in. And it's like, but no, we can't offer that. We're gonna, and I always put this like, we're gonna marginally cut the rate of increase of spending and defund your services, but not actually address the debt. Okay, so my point is, conservatives have nothing to offer people in urban areas. They really don't have a lot to even offer people in suburban areas beyond lower taxes and cheaper fuel prices. They offer stuff to people in rural areas, but if your idea is you're just going to indefinitely be able to win elections because older people in rural areas continue to vote for you in significant numbers, that's just not going to work. It's just a bad idea. Now, what is the healthcare plan the Republicans need to come up with? I don't know. They just need anything. Like, anything would be better. Tax deductions, healthcare savings accounts, just giving everybody $3,000 to spend. Like, anything would be better than what they have now, which is zero plan. And to most people, and this isn't even them being greedy, like if you're a parent, you're like, how am I going to afford, like if my kid has a disability or my kid has an illness, how am I going to afford it? And the Republicans are just like, we're going to repeal and replace Obamacare. It's going to be really good, guys. We don't have the plan. We might have it in like a decade or something. It's just like, no, that's not good enough. You don't have that. You don't have an economic policy that really benefits like people in my socioeconomic position in any meaningful way. So why should I support you? And they don't even really do the cultural issues thing properly. Like, we talk about the whole abortion issue and the fact that people keep saying, well, Roe v. Wade is the reason Republicans keep losing. Like, I don't live in the US, so maybe I haven't seen the ads, but how often do they actually just say pro choice is pro infanticide? They show like footage or whatever, or they describe what it actually is like. They talk about post birth abortion. They talk about the kids who, like, they talk about Kermit Gosnell. They talk about the shady shit that goes down. How much do they actually campaign on these issues? Aside from just saying, like, we're pro life, we're going to allow Planned Parenthood to attack us. I mean, they don't. Like, the Democrats are the real racists. They're killing off black people with Planned Parenthood is cringe, but it's at least something. It's at least messaging of some description, but they can't do that. And, like, when it comes to immigration, they can't do that. And when it comes to any of these issues, they, like, dog whistle to their base, but then they don't actually, like, go all the way with it. And once again, I mean, if you're going to lose anyways, and if it's going to be a shit show anyways, I mean, just go full balls to the wall whenever you get power. That's what the left does, and it more or less always works. And, like, once again, and I have my issues with Nick, but he said something very, I think, very intelligent when he was talking about the Supreme Court. Whenever you get a chance to appoint people, just appoint like the most partisan hack. Just take random Trump supporters from Oklahoma and just put them on the Supreme Court. Just make them federal judges. Just pass laws whenever you get in power that are just the most partisan, least fair, most corrupt thing you can possibly come up with. And I think that happened with, like, the whole Kelly campaign. He's like, I'm not going to take money from the Republican Party because it's technically a nonpartisan election. I don't want to run. I'm just like, fuck that. Who cares? Who cares, dude? Is your sense of personal honor worth the death of even one child who could possibly die because some big abortion vote comes up? Is it worth the deaths of how many people are going to die because dangerous criminals get put back on the streets? Is your honor really, like, worth that much? And it's a pride thing, but they just won't do it. So you have a group of people in most Western conservatives who will not offer a majority of the population anything meaningful, of any sort of real material benefit to them, even to people who are predisposed to vote for them, who won't address any of their core concerns, who will bring up 1960s talking points like socialism and communism and Marxism and stuff that most of their voters weren't even alive when it was a big thing, or weren't even politically active when it was a big thing, and then take, like, conservative positions on cultural issues and take the hit for taking that, but not getting any of the benefit from it. So I think that's, like, pretty much just what has to be done. They have to just go, look, we fucked up. We abandoned universities. We abandoned government. We abandoned the reins of power. They have to start trying to appeal to some of these people again. And like I said, just going completely paused and adopting the left's agenda isn't, like, once again, if that is what it takes to win, then there's no point in even, like, voting. There's no point in voting. There's no point in trying to gain power because it's just too late at that point. And at that point, just play Minecraft or drink yourself to death or just get high on meth and hope things somehow change when the collapse happens and industrial society implodes. So those are my thoughts on the matter. I hope that you found that interesting. God bless everybody, and yeah, more black pills to come.